relate, some are not. But I want us to start with the first question. And the first question says, how does the average Christian navigate political rhetoric that bombards us through the media and reconcile with the scriptures which say something different around the issue of reconciliation? So, the first question is, there are two realities. There is the reality of the kingdom that is calling us to reconciliation, but also we live in a political context where there is the reality of the politics which speaks on the same issue. And we say in the kingdom and based on the kingdom understanding, racial reconciliation is possible. In the political side, we hear a message that says it is very hard and most of the time it is impossible. So how do we reconcile the two? And how do we empower just an ordinary Christian to be able to protect it? Maybe coupling that question with this one, which is close to it, would be how then do we deal with the trigger? If we say racial reconciliation is possible from the kingdom perspective, but we live in a society where there are triggers, comments, action, and other things that are pointing us to extreme corners of racial intolerance, of racial strife. How do we deal with those two? I think that would be the first one. So, gentlemen, you are free to try. So, Peter does the
So, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is that how do we reconcile the requirements of the kingdom over and against some of the realities of biblical rhetoric? And for me, I think it's what Robert's already touched on, is that this is a very personal journey where the love of God is the gold standard by which we live. And so, as with any sanctification process, we've got to continue to deal with our own heart. We've got to continue to deal with our own racism. It's a process that is required by the scripture. So we don't allow the reality of the world or the rhetoric of the world to become the standard. The standard is the scripture, and the standard is our own process of sanctification, which the scriptures require of us. So that is our response. The ultimate command of Jesus and requirement is that we love our neighbor as ourselves. And that needs to remain the gold standard, no matter what the temperature is, no matter what the rhetoric is, no matter how heated it becomes, no matter how much we disagree, love remains the gold standard. That would be my simple first one.
Anyone want to say?
I think Rob addressed that quite well, actually, in his talk. Putting out the picture of revolution versus reconciliation. Looking at, I think that's so much of what Rob says. I think you could double click on a number of the things that he said. It literally needs to be dissected and chewed on. It's very dense what he spoke about. And I think there's such a reality, particularly around this subject, that we separate this as a political agenda rather than a kingdom agenda. And I think to go to Rob's point about Peter was raising the dead, preaching the gospel, and yet he had discrimination in his life. And many of us are in churches, and we want to see the lost saved, and we want to see people raised from the dead, and we want to pray for the sick, and we want to see the demonized come into freedom. But the Bible says favoritism is sin. Partiality is sin. And unfortunately, it's so often the sin that is last to be recognized. It's so easy to hide it in sin. Like you kind of can skirt the issues. And I think God has got us in a beautiful place to say, actually, no, you can't skirt the issue. Where is your heart? I mean, you can go unpack tons of scriptures. Don't regard anybody from a worldly point of view, from a fleshly point of view. Do we see people by their age, their color, their gender, or do we see the creative value and creative purpose on their life? As Rob said, he saw a white man driving instead of an old man driving. So I think Rob really
That's good.
Sure. Okay. There is another question here. I so enjoy this discussion. However, I don't see in our meeting that we understand the gravity of this. That people outside see a divided church. This is a very great situation. Paul challenged Peter regarding Jews and Greeks. So I think the question here is, yes, the church must be reconciled. The church must be unified. Is what the world sees in us a true reflection? Or are we in the journey of inward reconciliation? What are we doing? Are we calling each other out often around issues of race, issues of stereotyping, and all these racial tensions? So people outside see a divided church. So do we understand that? How do we?
No, I agree. No point in hiding from this. We are still a very much divided country. If you were to go on Facebook, whenever there's an issue, a burning issue around the country, the comments would go around, the division would go around, the racial lines. And it's so unfortunate because when you think to yourself that according to Stats SA, 80% of this country is Christian. 80% of this country claims to be Christian. And yet, when you look at comments and how people respond to, racial incidences, it doesn't reflect. For me, this is, I hope I'm not simplifying a complex problem, but as believers, I think we are advantaged. The Bible in the book of Galatians speaks of human nature without God. Human nature without God, as Rob illustrated, whenever there is an incident, our human nature, our carnal self, wants to respond in a particular way. I think the challenge, and as I said, including myself, we are all a work in progress. Thank God that the Bible has painted a beautiful picture of a reconciled church, but I think we still have a challenge. We must learn to identify with the church before we identify ourselves as African first, as white, as Indian. I'm praying and I'm hoping at some point, whenever there are these issues, we will then, respond in a godly manner. I agree, it's true. People see a divided church, but it takes one person, it takes me, it takes you, to make that decision that from now on, we don't just identify ourselves when we go out of this room as Africans or as Indians. And we, as I said, the Bible says when we are controlled by the Spirit, it means even our responses to whatever comes our way is not, we don't respond in a carnal nature. So I feel like as people of God, we are advantaged because we have been empowered by the Spirit of God, and we must take that advantage.
I think the other thing, just on top of that is that you have to appreciate the church is going to join. Since it's bad in perception in Acts chapter 2, the scriptures say that Jesus is actually removing the wrinkles, the spots, and the blemishes from us as a collective people. And that will take different shapes and forms in different nations based on what are the diseases of the societies in which the church exists. In South African context, it will be issues of division, discrimination, racism. In other contexts, other things. But I think even the prophetic view of the migration of the church towards the fact that life is also important. Otherwise, we simply get overwhelmed by what seems to be like the church is going nowhere. Actually, Jesus is building the church. That's why we're having this meeting today. And as we go out to implement things that we are convicted about, that becomes the movement forward in the church.
So, Rob, you also spoke kingdom process and the revolutionary process. So I think this question is trying to address how to balance the two. It says, how can the church convince people that the way to reconciliation is found in the church or through what the church represents, considering the colonialism, apartheid, which exploited the church, where had material results and spiritual results, but it was exploiting the church to further its own agenda. So how do you convince people that we in the church have the solution, whereas the ills is living through us?
I think it's in building and pioneering churches that are healthy, that are built on biblical foundations. The issue with the Bible is that anybody can manipulate the scripture for any end. That's just the reality. It's not just about racism and colonialism, and it's other things too. But the solution to that is we need to build proper churches founded on biblical principles that can, over a period of time, really stand the test of time in bearing the testimony of the nature of Christ. Believers living together in reconciliation, reconciled communities within churches is what the world is waiting for. And so that question cannot be solved by a seminar, or it's got to be a journey. We need this kind of journey. We need more churches in Durban engaged in this journey, where we can build proper churches, communities of faith that are built on proper foundations, reconciling, transforming, and bearing the image of Christ.
So, sure. Maybe before
I could say something. To use that excuse is actually ludicrous. Just to put it out there. It's like saying, tell me you're a Christian, but you're having an affair with another woman, so I'm not following Jesus. It's not logical to take what people do wrong in the name of Jesus and say, Jesus, I don't want Jesus.
Yeah.
Actually, you've got to see it for what it is. Do you know that Matthew 28, the Great Commission, there was a time in the church where they believed that Matthew 28 was already done with the disciples, and our job was never to reach out. There was a theological point of view that they believed that was done. Do you know that in the early settlers, the 1600s kind of era, when people started the colonial kind of age, they believed, some of the church believed, that their job was not to reach out to black people because they weren't really people.
Yeah.
The church, Matthew 28, go to all the nations, making disciples of all nations, baptizing all people, groups, everybody in the. You think, that's so obvious.
Yeah.
There were times in the church that wasn't obvious, and God constantly reforms the church. God will constantly bring the church to her knees in submission to Him. And God is building His church, not us. And our generation, what we've got to say is, God, what is it for us? And let us take responsibility for the revelation that we have and live that thing out. And I think so often what we can do is we use that as, one of the other questions that comes into it, and I'm getting even more controversial, is, but how can we believe this Jesus? Because actually the picture that we have is it's a white Jesus, not a black Jesus. Friends, that is wrong to believe that. Number one, God is not a person. He's a spirit. You can't see Him. He's not male and He's not female. Actually, that's theologically God. Jesus is a man, a person. But we don't have a white Jesus and a black Jesus and an Indian Jesus and a colored Jesus. We have a Jesus who happened to be not English his first language. You would have been, it's like we have this Jesus, and we've got to have a responsibility in our generation to take that revelation and say, you know what? What was done then was wrong, and as the church, we've got to own it. We've got to say that was wrong. That was wrong. But man, you can't use that as an excuse to say, well, I'm not going to change. Because actually, you will have a revelation of Jesus and you'll be judged according to the revelation that you have of Jesus, not of the revelation they have of Jesus. And I feel like there's often we as Christians will use these things to deflect the thing away from actually is my heart different? Is God working in my heart? And I think that is the kind of, listen, that's the revelation that I've had to go through as we all say, as Rob said before, somebody said, THAMI said, actually works in progress. I don't get this right. As a white person, let me ask you this question. Is Eskom a black problem or an Eskom problem? Is Eskom all those black guys that couldn't organize anything? Or, that's what happens. I'm in those conversations. Or is this actually, God has got us on a journey in a nation. We took us 300 years to get here. It's not going to take us 20 years to get us out of here. And actually, we've got to have grace and mercy for people and walk this thing out. Love and integrity, loving our neighbor, and all that Rob and all the guys are saying. And I feel like we can't bypass Jesus and the cross. You've got to walk through the cross. It's like, you've got to die to yourself. This is not about them, and then it's about you. And who you had. Anyway, I'm starting to preach now.
This is interesting because you are touching issues of eternity with the material ability. So, which the next question is, we often seem to sound like we're saying we can do eternity issues without addressing material condition. So, issues of race, issues of inequality, they may not necessarily speak to eternity, but they have an impact on how we view eternity. So, the question now is, how then do we practically move the church as transformed individuals in a material space with material conditions, with eternity within us and an eternity mindset, bring true reconciliation that speaks to issues of injustice, inequality, while emphasizing and valuing eternal issues? How do we practically bring that balance and journey towards that balance? One of the questions was, give us a practical solution, not to say, if they slap you on the face, give the other cheek, or just love one another. Practically so, there are issues of this triple BEE. Issues of social justice, issues of elections. We are going towards election on the 8th of May. One of the questions is, how do you vote? One person here said, I don't trust the ruling party, but also I don't want to associate my vote with parties that were associated with oppression and prejudice. So how do you vote as a Christian? So the question is, we are eternal people, but we live in a practical, material world. How do we reconcile the truth and balance the truth to be effective as a channel?
I still want to go back. There was just one aspect about the previous question. The church calling the roles public. I must share a concern about that. I think it's safer when we are in an environment like this one, where we can correct our wrongs privately before going out public. You know, I think we are all aware that nationally, the church, black, white, Indian, colored, the church is under attack from government. So I find it more decent if we you know, we have these meetings. Now, coming to this question, I come from I'm from a township church. I know a lot of you have never been to township churches. The way we do church, you know, Rob touched on this. The way we do church to us is hyper spiritual. I mean, like, seriously hyper spiritual. Yeah. People that guys, it's not just about, you know, the by and by in heaven. We are impacted in church. We are filled with the power of the Holy Spirit so that we can go out and impact. Yeah. The church first still needs to fix itself. Well, at least where I come from, you know. And we, unfortunately, we're like, what, 70% of this country? People who are just trying to solve everything through prayer, and I believe in prayer. Boy, I can pray. But I've come to accept that we pray so that we can be empowered. So I trying to address a minor aspect of that question. It starts by reconditioning the mind of the church. Yes. That we come to this environment to be recharged so that we can go out and impact at work, impact in academia, impact wherever God has placed you.
If I'm understanding the question correctly, and if I can answer, dare I say, as a white person, a privileged white person, I think that white people, for the most part, Christians and non-Christians, have no idea what apartheid was about. We've got away with murder and have been held very little to account. Most white people think that apartheid was just a little inconvenience. Oops. And the transition in 1994, for all the positives, failed to hold us to account, to actually apologize and repent for our complicity in a very evil, damaging process and system. So what Stan pointed out, you know, Jonathan Jansen said that the present didn't start in a vacuum. The present didn't start in 1994. The present started decades and decades, multiplied decades of systematic under-education, miseducation, oppression, etc. And so, in part to answer that question, I think that white people have never been held to account to actually see that what we were a part of was a sin. And there is a part of the reconciliation process is justice. And I think that's still a process that we need to navigate about economic justice, because we were the recipients of economic privilege, and everything was stacked in our favor. And I don't think white people have had a mirror held up to them to say, this is what it looked like. What sacrifices are you prepared to make in order to make a measure of reparation? I think it's just been plain sailing. We got away with it, and it's hardly even been a slap on the wrist, to be honest. And I think the church has failed to hold people to account and to speak the truth, because it's very uncomfortable and it's likely to empty churches.
There are too many questions that are coming up. But one of them talks around the reality of the black church, Indian church, colored church, white church is still a reality. And it's a product of spatial blending, but even how we do church at times, culture and material conditions of where people are located is part of the pathology that produces how we interact with each other in social spaces, because church breeds that in us. So the question here is, do we acknowledge that the pathology of South Africa is trauma? Black, Indian, colored, white. We are people driven by trauma. Some of us may have experiences of being hijacked. When you see a young black man, you see trauma before you see a person. When you see, for example, I always share my story as a young man at the age of 10, beaten just for trying to greet a big white Afrikaans male in Afrikaans, and I just missed one word. Instead of pa, I said opa, and I got the beating of a lifetime. Dealing with that trauma, if I did not go through personal reconciliation, personal transformation, healing, I was not going to be able to deal with that trigger and that trauma. So how do we deal with the communal trauma? Regardless of which culture you come from, regardless of background, how do we deal with it within the church? The other question that was supplementing that one was from a person in the room who says, can the church start having support groups for racists? And the signature was, I am a racist. So it's a product of trauma. We are a society of trauma. Yes, Christ restores. The gospel of the kingdom empowers, it illuminates, it brings clarity back. It's a journey. Can this be part of discipleship? We live in churches, we are discipling people. Can it form part of discipleship? Or is it part of discipleship? Are we discipling people to be good stewards in terms of relations in the workplace? One question would be, in the private sector, it seems like it's a place where white folks are more comfortable. In the public sector, it's where blacks are more comfortable. And then the Indians and color end up wondering, not sure where they belong. So is the whole issue of race reconciliation about black and white, or is it involving everyone?
Yeah, I think that the human race, the first point of trauma is actually Genesis chapter 3, the point of our fall and our separation from God. And I think since that time we've had many other manifestations of that problem, just manifesting in different kinds and forms, but actually it's the same thing. I try to look at Jesus leading his disciples in that political environment, in the Jewish culture, colonized by the Romans. You've probably seen a Roman soldier every corner carrying a spear and a shield. It's an environment of trauma. And he leads them over 3.5 years. He eventually himself becomes the victim of that system. And he dies, criminal's death. And he comes back, and in Acts chapter 1 they ask the question, when are you going to restore the kingdom of Israel? And it seems that up to that point their frame of mind was a certain way. They were viewing things a certain way. And obviously he shifts them to a different cause. So he's sending them to nations, he's sending them to people groups and stuff like that. That's why we get to it. I think sometimes the one thing to answer that is that we live in a broken world, and it's going to remain broken. This world is not our faces. The prophetic scriptures say darkness and thick darkness. There will be terrible times in the last days. So our Republican context is never going to change. Actually, it's going to become worse. We're seeing nationalism is on the rise. Racism is on the rise. We've had a shooting in New Zealand. Those incidents, I mean, it's like, who thought something like that would happen in New Zealand? New Zealand, out of all places. We expect something like that to happen in the US. The world is not going to change, the world is going to become worse. In the midst of that, I think the focus of the Lord in the midst of that darkness and brokenness, you do have to have a people that can bear the light of God in the midst of it. And so it goes back to the question about salvation and the material conditions, stuff like that. I feel our conversations need structure, because without the structure of the Word of God, it's almost like playing soccer without the lines. Without you actually end up frustrating ourselves. So Peter says that, not this Peter, the Peter in the Bible. It could be this Peter. He's reincarnation, we believe in it, right? He said the Word of God stimulates us into wholesome thinking, thought. And so the one thing is that the republics are not going to change. Actually, the conditions of human life that level is not going to change. But in the midst of that, Isaiah 60, darkness and thick darkness, that's progressive. But light is rising within you. And so when I read about how Jesus is leading his disciples, he seems to be absolutely not concerned about the Roman imposition. And they are concerned. They are saying, when are you going to fix this problem? And he says, well, actually, that's not the problem. Because the very same people who complain about the Romans would go in Acts chapter 6 and start discriminating. Peter was a racist himself. So we stand as victims of whatever racism, but we ourselves actually are perpetrators of the same thing that we complain about. So I think my point is that the republics are not going to change. The conditions of human life is not going to change. That's the prophetic scripture. In the end, it's going to end up in destruction. The thing is headed for destruction. In the midst of that, you need to be a Noah building the ark to redeem your family, you need to have a community that can redeem the human race. That really is the purpose of church. And I think Jesus was trusting enough of the work of the Holy Spirit in the human heart to not have a conversation with Peter about, then what about the Roman soldiers? Even when he pulls a sword and he chops off somebody's ear, it seems that Jesus is on a track, and I think we need to follow him and find him and follow him. Find the track of the Lord and be that example in the midst of a breaking world. The world is breaking, it will continue to break. Racism is not, people, I was in a seminar once and somebody had written a book about racism. They were talking about, the kids. Look at the kids, they're great, they're coming together and there's no racism. It's all a lie. That's based on innocence by age. As they grow up, they come into a consciousness of race. That's what God called in that generation of Joshua the reproach of Egypt. He said, you need to chop your foreskins because you have the reproach of Egypt. So they grow into a system, they smell it, they smell the coffee, they become the thing. That's the world in which we live. It's a spiritual dynamic. It's not a political thing, actually. And in the midst of that, I think God is calling us, church, to be the light that heals the brokenness and create a possibility for somebody to find a community that is whole.
Just to speak a little bit into that triggers, how do you deal with that? I've read lots of conversations around what do you do? You're a black person and you're at work and you really had an amazing weekend. You're at a conference. God is with you. You are so white people are beautiful, and it's just amazing. And you go to work and the white guy that sits next to you just passes some unbelievably unhelpful comment, and you think, I'm back to square one again. And the reality is that's not going to go away. Because if it's not race, it will be something else anyway, because it's kind of... But I used to take it back, and it's probably unhelpful for a white guy to be saying this in the first place, but I'll give it a go. And so when I was growing up at university, I used to drink a lot, and it wasn't water that I used to drink. And we used to go huge. I mean, we used to have a lot of fun. It wasn't fun, we wouldn't be doing it. And I used to drink a lot. And then what happened was I came back to Durban and started going to church, and I started really getting convicted around my drinking. And actually actually I shouldn't be drinking that much, you know. So I would always, I only used to have one more than what I should have. And so I started realizing, actually, because I've got to stop this. And then you'd have a work function and contract. I was working for contractors at the time, and the subcontractors would come in and there'd be a party and they'd kind of do all these things. And it was so difficult for me to just have one beer or two beers and then say no. And it was a real struggle, like a proper struggle. And what would happen though is then you would have a rain day. So in contracting circles you have a rain day, and then obviously we were all single guys staying away, and you'd have a rain day, and so you'd work until 11 o'clock, and then after that you'd be in the pub playing pool for the rest of the day. And by the time you're walking out of there, you have had a good time. So what used to happen with me is the smell of a dingy pub. You know that pub smell, that alcohol, like years of alcohol on the floor. You wouldn't know that. The smell of that alcohol pub smell, which is quite a unique smell. It's like old beer smell.
Yeah.
When I'd walk into an environment and smell that, it would be, yo, I'd love a beer now. You know that feeling? If you lived the life of sleeping around, and then you get married, and you're at work and there's this very good-looking lady there, and she starts to, what stops you from doing it? Because those are all triggers, like there are moments in your life that trigger stuff. And I think what I've realized is before the trigger comes, God has had to put something in my heart and form something in my heart. In fact, the measure of the formation in my heart is when the trigger stops triggering and actually I bring grace into the situation. You see what I'm saying? And I think it's no different, and it's difficult for me to say this because I'm not in that conversation, so I can't really, I'm speaking kind of beyond myself. But I don't think it's any different in reality around what's formed in your heart. Because when those things trigger us, it actually means that something of my identity is still not formed. Jesus is still not formed. Because let me tell you, Jesus faced those things. Peter faced those things. The disciples faced those things. And friends, if it's not one thing, it's going to be another. And that's temptation. There's a moment of, I can respond now, or I can go to that person and say, you know what? You say that to me all the time. It's actually deeply offensive. It makes me feel small. It makes me feel like you're superior, I'm inferior, and actually it's not healthy.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, that takes a lot of guts to do that. Instead of going away and stewing, are we having that conversation? In the same way as the lady that would come and try to proposition me, I would say, you know what, I'm married, you see this ring, it means I'm taken. Actually, that's not the life I live. And you know what, it's actually unhelpful for you to be doing it either, because you're destroying families. But we don't have those conversations, those brave conversations. And I think these trigger moments are they're terrible. I mean, I don't want anybody to have to go through that stuff, but I think they're opportunities for God to show us where are we in this journey. I mean, these guys can correct me at any time in this process because I don't read, I'm not there. But I feel like there is practical things like that we've got to get hold of.
It's good.
Because man, people are going to say stupid things, not because they want to, they don't even know what they're saying. And then you get other people that know what they're saying, and it's even harder. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but I think there's something there that we're going to all have to deal with in time. It's not going to go away.
Sure. Somebody asked about practical examples that we can, use to impact and change our society. I read a story somewhere, and I think I've had a new term in church, in my church circles. People speak about marketplace disciples. Marketplace disciples. I think some of us, or some of those churches who've got people who are placed in strategic positions, we must have these difficult conversations. You know, those people who are in positions where they can impact. You know, we start confronting these issues. I think that for me, that's a practical example as a believer, as a church leader, that we need to raise and conscientize people who are going out there. I read a story last year that a farmer in Bloom actually gave, I can't remember whether it was part of his farm or the whole of his farm, to people who had been working for him for many years. Yeah. That's a practical example. And I think that should start in church. I still worry about the stats that I read, that 80% of this country claims to be Christian, and yet there is no justice and restitution, which says that church is not doing its work. Amen. Sorry.
And I think the process, though I mean, often refer to this of Zacchaeus and the interchange between Jesus and Zacchaeus. The reality of it is that we know how to legislate. You can't legislate generosity. You can't even legislate justice. It's got to be the work of the human heart. Yeah. By the Holy Spirit. Amen. And so we need to be teaching the word, we need to be administrating that word, creating an environment in which, as Zacchaeus can say, the conviction of the Lord. I don't think Jesus came in and said, well, we've been stealing. You know, I think it was a conviction. In any case, if it's not about conviction, then it's communism. And I think we believe the kingdom, not communism. So you can't legislate these things, got to be the fruit of. And if people are not doing it, you can't force, you can't say, well, church is faulty. It's their problem. I'm not going to make somebody's problem of disobedience my problem. I have to engage a journey. So I think that's important.
Sure. We are not doing well in terms of time. And there are about 8 questions that have not been attended to. But I want to give our commitment that we have agreed early this year that this year we'll do this more often, not just once a year. We'll do this more often because there has to be an emphasis within the body, but also we have to empower each other on dealing with these things. It is a journey with the people here, and it has to be a journey with all of us. There is also a temptation that we must deal with, that those who lead, they've arrived. No. In fact, those who lead are the ones who are in trouble, because they have to steer the ship, address racial reconciliation without addressing gender inequality, economic inequality, or inequality as a whole. Can we successfully address it? That's number 1. Number 2, do beyond praying and repentance rhetoric, not repentant action. Because I think some of us were exposed to the rhetoric of repentance, Lord, I repent, without action, without change, without practical evidence of saying, I am acknowledging that there is something wrong and I'm turning from there. So the question is, how do we restore and deal with offenses that have taken place within church, in particular around race discrimination in church? How do we bring healing to each other? Do we allow people to speak out on instances where they were wrong racially, where they felt racially discriminated? And the third element is, while we are on a journey of reconciling South African church, the church in South Africa, whether you call yourself black, white, Indian, or multicultural, at the face of the new tension in our nation of other migrants, people who are coming from other parts of the continent, where it has been viewed as white, Indian, colored, and black South Africans relate with those better than they relate with each other. How do we find healing and restoration without using those who come from other African countries as a scapegoat. Another example was, it is easy to ordain a non-South African black to be an elder than to ordain a South African black to be an elder in a multicultural church. How do we deal with those realities?
So there's a lot to that question. I think on the very first part is can we, and the answer has to be yes. There's an imperative of scripture of racial reconciliation, gender reconciliation, economic reconciliation. There's an imperative in the gospel. It's not an optional extra for the fringe, for those who are wired that way. It is central to the gospel. So the answer to your first question, it must be yes.
I don't understand.
Yes. and how. So the how is the second part, and I don't think anyone claims that they know the how. I think we live up to the word that we're being exposed to, so we can be very selective of the word that we share with our people, but people are convicted by the word that they're hearing, so we do need to consider the diet. And I do think that conversation and dialogue is very undervalued and underutilized, because we are used to church being very much a monologue, one person standing up, but we do need to create environments like this where we become comfortable or uncomfortable to listen and be exposed to stories and opinions and viewpoints that are different to our own. We have to expose ourselves. We have to learn to keep our mouths shut and listen to views that are different to our own, and then be prepared to start living differently. So, as a privileged white male, is there something that we have to do with our wealth differently?
Definitely yes.
And I think that question, that last question by Peter, just thinking what he said was keep quiet. But that's great. But I think that last question is that as a privileged white man, it's an evolving reality. There is a black middle class that's emerging in this country with wealth in churches that are not necessarily willing to share those resources. And so that's where again and I'm not saying that the history of white oppression is insignificant. What I'm saying is that these problems evolve. So within the context of the 12 disciples of Jesus in Acts chapter 1, their problem was the Rome. In 2019, Rome is not our problem. If you said your concerns, that's not a problem. The human conditions evolve. And in the evolution of human conditions, we realize we all have the same problem. And we need to be involving or opening up that question to more people. There's a black, affluent middle class that's emerging in this country. When your first point of entrance into the kingdom is repent, change your mind. And they ask the question, how do you do so? You have two truths. He said, share with the one who does not have. So it has to do with our understanding of what it means to enter the kingdom. It has to do with some of the gospels we preach that are not helping the process. But ultimately it has to do with, if I see a old white man driving back and a memory of a young boy in the village seeing policemen and soldiers guarding a funeral of a black MP guy as a 10, 12-year-old. The conversation Jesus has with me is that, oh Robert, I understand your situation. When your prayer has been answered. The conversation Jesus has with me is not, Robert, I understand your childhood. The conversation Jesus has with me is, Robert, fix yourself up. And in challenging me to fix myself up, he obviously comes in gently as my healer in that process. Yeah. That white man driving that car does not have healing for me. Yeah. Jesus does. Yeah. And it is in that conversation with the Lord that I'm going to be.
I'm beginning to think Escom is white. Very if it was a black guy, it would be coming back out of past, but it's fine. I know there are a lot of questions, and the reality is we can't answer all of them now. But I think some of those questions I want to throw back to you guys. As much as this was a panel, the purpose was to activate a discussion that needs to take place within church, within our circles, in our connect groups, in our home groups, in our families, to say what is it that we understand from Scripture that compels us to pursue reconciliation. A few days ago, I wrote something on my WhatsApp status provoking a discussion. I said one day we'll have to sit down and discuss the evils of BBBE towards black emerging entrepreneurs. And the question that I was getting were quite interesting. And I said, let's have a dialogue and discuss that. So it's a different angle that someone might not even consider. So let's talk about these things from a clean hand who had passed on the issue. So when we create these platforms, we're not reopening wounds, but we're saying, let's deal with the wounds and be helpful.
It's not just to have another event, it's actually to get you connecting with each other. It's to get you connecting across churches and across racial groups and start these conversations and have these conversations, but then also get some instruction and hear what God's saying and then worship together and all those things. So 7th of April, I think at 6 o'clock, we're going to be at the Enrichment Class, and that's going to be a wonderful time. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do yet, but we'll be.
Well, I don't have much to say except that for this journey to yield result, we need to come out of our comfort zones. You just need to come out of your comfort zone and trust God. You know, if you trust Him, He'll do it perfectly.
I think let's follow Jesus and let's study His Word. Let's go back to Scripture, to discipleship, and let Scripture sanitize the environment. Let Scripture frame our mind and our thinking and our feelings. Because the reality of it, the truth of God actually stands as truth and stands as reality, regardless of, beyond just your experiences and your feelings around those experiences. And we need to find God, follow Him as a community. Together it works as a flock. I think that's what God is wanting to build. So let's just follow Him.
I have to follow Robert. In fact, in 2015, when we were dealing with the wave of xenophobia in Durban, it actually, dare I say, Robert, who wrote something on Facebook that the nation cannot enter into territory that the church hasn't already claimed. And so, as a church, we have to claim the ground before the nation can enter into it. And that's part of what we're trying to facilitate through these kind of conversations.
Thank you. I think this is the end of it. For that question on how do you vote, talk to me privately.